All right. Uh, in this video, we're going to look at just the very, very basics of what comprehensive emergency management is. It sounds really, really daunting, really complicated, really confusing. Comprehensive. I've got to cover everything. I've got to think of everything. I need a plan for everything. I need to know exactly what I'm going to do for every eventuality. That's not the case. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the big buckets of what is involved in comprehensive emergency management. We're all about keeping it simple. The cycle is simple. We're going to keep it simple. You may have heard of plan, do, check, act, or as I like to say, plan, practice, and perfect. Comprehensive emergency management is mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Sometimes you'll see a fifth one thrown in there, prevention, but I'll explain why I think that these four are the core four buckets that we need to look at. Mitigation. We want to start by knowing our risks, knowing what the hazards are, and then we want to look at what can we do to decrease the probability or the impact. Those are the two things that we want to try and take control over or reduce. They're the two things we have influence on. Some controls, and we're going to spend a whole different session on controls. Some reduce the probability or the likelihood of an event occurring, and some decrease the impact. But anyways, this is basically what mitigation is. Classically in mitigation, there's the four T's. You treat, tolerate, transfer, or terminate. And that's why I think prevention is part of mitigation. It's not its own category, because to prevent something, it'll fall into one of these buckets. So when we treat something, what does that mean? Well, risk, there's a certain amount of risk in everything we do. So to treat it is to say, what is the inherent risk or what the risk before any controls, any interventions are put in place. And if we think that that risk is too high, so we'll assess our risk and we say, yeah, this risk, we've assessed it, and this is the likelihood and the impact. This is where we think it is. This is its rank. We can put controls in place to try and bring that risk down. And the controls, as we talked about, can either impact the probability that something is going to occur or the impact. Here's a quick example is if I put my seatbelt on when I get in the car, that does nothing to change the probability that I will get into an accident or a collision, I guess. It might not be an accident. Somebody's at fault. If I reduce my speed, that's a control I'm putting in place that will both reduce the probability because of an impact or a collision or an accident. Again, the accident word, very, very used to saying that. But it will also decrease the impact because I'm going slower, there's less energy, and I'm going slower, so the probability is less because I have more time to react. People have more time to see me and me to see them. So that's putting in controls in. That's treating it. That's changing the probability or the impact. Tolerate. Well, you might just say certain amounts of risks it's within our appetite, or even it's a little bit higher. We need a treatment plan for this. Well, we might just say we're choosing to accept it. We don't think that the effort and the money to put in all these controls is going to be worth it. We would rather accept that risk. We're going to tolerate it. Just make sure you get it signed off properly. Don't just say, yeah, we're going to tolerate it. Fill out, have a risk acceptance form. We'll talk about those later too. And get the right level of authority or leadership to sign off on it, saying, yes, here's the rationale, and we are making a risk-based decision, a conscious decision to accept this risk. Transfer. We do this a lot in our own day-to-day lives. That's what insurance is. We're transferring the risk to someone else, the insurance company, or to someone's else, to all of the clients of that insurance company. That's why when there's big incidents, big payouts, everybody's premiums go up because it's all transferred to us, to everyone else who has an insurance policy or a joint venture. You go in with a partner, a business partner on something. That transfers some of the risk to somebody else. You're not taking 100% of the risk. Even insurance companies, they go to reinsurance companies and they get insurance. Terminate. Stop doing it. One example that I have is that, when I was working with the water utilities, you'd use chlorine, big 1 ton or tonner containers of chlorine gas to treat the water. Well, if they explode, leak, all kinds of issues with them, that's a problem. Well, we have to treat the water. Can we terminate using chlorine? Well, you could use salt. And you can also treat the water with a salt process, which is far safer because then you're getting big deliveries of salt basically to your facility. And if that happens, well, you might kill the grass that the salt falls on if the big truck spills, but that's about it. So you might have to actually terminate or stop doing whatever it is that you're doing if you deem it's too risky. You can't treat it, too expensive to treat it. You don't want to tolerate that risk. You can't accept it. You can't transfer it. You can't get insurance. Nobody will partner with you. Then you're going to have to stop doing it. Preparedness. Okay, so the preparedness phase, that part of the cycle, that's where we develop all of our plans. So we've looked at our risks, looked at the hazards. Yep, let's make some plans. Might be specific contingency plans that we know that we have to prepare for, or that legislation, regulations demand that we have certain plans in place for fires, evacuation, shelter in place. Once you have that plan, you want to validate that that plan is accurate. So you're going to do exercises. If the plan is valid and accurate, that's great. Then you want to train your staff, your people on that plan, and focus on that. Take it away from. We'll do a whole other thing on exercising, but take it away from focusing on the people for now. Focus on the plans and then test it. Are the plans valid? If the plans are valid, then you work on training to make sure people are enacting the plans. If the plans are not valid, there's no point training on it because it's not going to be what they actually do. If people are doing something different in a response, it's one of two problems, basically. It's either the plan is not reflective accurately of what you're going to be doing, or the people aren't doing what the good plan says they should do. So you look at those. Equipment and resources. So once you know what your plan is for how you respond, do you have the right equipment and resources for that? If it's an oil spill, do you have, containment booms, absorbent booms? Do you have boats? Do you have means to deploy your resources? Do you have extinguishers for some of your controls? Do you have fire alarms, smoke detectors, hoses, shovels? What do you need to actually enact your plan and to be able to respond effectively? Response. Well, this is when it all comes together. For me, this is when you enact your plans. This is quite often, people say, well, is it very stressful during a response? It can be, but at the same time, it can also be easier because then you don't have a whole myriad of things to focus on. You don't have a whole bunch of conflicting priorities. Everything else, day to day, generally stops and you focus on the response. The old train hard, fight easy adage. Once the response kicks in, it is what it is. You're going to have to make do with whatever you have. If you've prepared well, you've got the right training, the right teams, the right equipment, the right resources. You've mitigated things down as much as possible. Then hopefully your response is quick, effective, and things go well with reduced costs. There's going to be overlap. You might have a whole bunch. When you were in that planning phase, you might have identified emergency response plans to actually deal with the event. Is it a fire? Is it a flood? What is it? Business continuity plans. How do we keep the rest of our business going while we're dealing with that event? How do we maintain a certain kind of predefined level of customer service or critical functions and tasks and processes that we want to provide while we're dealing with a response? Disaster recovery. kind of where business continuity started, but that's more on the IT side. How do we recover critical applications and hardware? So let's take an example of, I don't know, a pipeline. If you have a fire at one of your pumping stations, how do you deal with that response while you still maintain your operations to other unaffected stations? If you're a bank and you have a fire in one branch or a flood in one branch, how do you make sure you deliver services to those impacted clients while you deal with the fire, coordinate and collaborate with first responders? Maybe it's impacting multiple branches. How do you still maintain your business? What if there's a big event with a vendor and the applications go down? How do you then enact your business continuity plans to still accept new clients, provide cash to people, provide oil, energy, electricity, phone service, clothing, whatever your business is, while you're dealing with the event? And remember, it's just basically on the response side. You don't have to have a plan for everything. It's a standard response, but not a million plans. You will be developing specific contingency plans, like for what to do for a fire, how to evacuate safely, how to shelter in place, lockdowns, things like that. But you don't need a plan for every single thing. What happens if there's a lightning strike? What happens if there's a tornado? What happens if there's a terrorist attack? What happens if there's a utility strike? We'll look at in another session, looking at basic risks, and it's not what happens, it's the outcome of that. So we're going to look at that. Just remember that with plans. It's a basic standard response that you do for any, it's an all hazards plan that you use for all hazards, not a plan for each and every hazard. Recovery. So there's going to be the recovery phase of the event, the cleanup, rebuilding, all of that. And then there's the recovery in terms of your program. So you want to do a hot wash, which is just a really, really quick, right after the event or the exercise, either one, if it's an actual incident or an exercise, you want to quickly get, once you kind of stop and you're done the emergency portion of it, a couple of things that went well, a couple of things that went wrong, or things that we can do better, if you want to soften the language. And you want to capture those right away while they're fresh in people's minds. Then you want to do a full debrief if it's big enough. And capture, here's what happened, here's what led up to it, here's the big milestones. We'll do a whole other session on how to do a debrief. But you want to capture all of that. And then you want the lessons learned. Quite often, and too often, it's lessons noted. So you don't actually put down, okay, here's the issue. Here's the action we're going to take to correct it. Either revise a plan, for example. We were missing equipment, so we want to purchase that equipment. People didn't know what to do during the response. The plan was good, but they screwed up implementing the plan, so we have to focus on training. Well, who's going to do it? When are they going to do it by? You capture it, you document it, and you track it to completion. So that's very important. And then you roll all that back in. Recovery rolls right back in, as we saw in the cycle, rolls right back into the first phase, which was mitigation. So you want to review your plans, revise if necessary, create if you were missing some. Then you look at, did we have the right equipment? No? Okay, let's develop a plan to acquire the correct equipment. Did we have the right plans? No. Okay, let's revise our plans or build new plans. The plans were correct. Okay, let's look at training so that people know what to do, increase that awareness, increase the knowledge, the competency, and then let's exercise it again. That's it. That is a very fast take on what is comprehensive emergency management.